Well, welcome to the second in the event sponsored by Poem Present. One announcement, William Fuller will be giving a lecture tomorrow at 1 o'clock in Wiebold 408. I hope you can join us for that as well. As always, I'd like to thank those whose sponsorship makes the series possible: the Office of the Provost, the Dean of the Humanities, the Department of English, the University Arts Council, and Chicago Review. Matthias Regan from the English department will introduce tonight's guest.
Hello. I first encountered Bill Fuller's poetry 4 years ago. I begin with a public apology. I first encountered Bill Fuller's poetry 4 years ago when a friend asked if I'd help start a chapbook press that would begin by publishing a manuscript called Avoid Activity. And I was absolutely delighted by Bill's work and readily agreed to try to help publish it. But we took the title too much to heart. And 3 years later, Avoid Activity has yet to be distributed. There should be copies tomorrow. Yeah. In the meantime, another book has appeared. This one by the considerably more productive press, Flood Editions. And I should mention that Bill is the author of many other chapbooks, including The Cold Jealousies, Bite, The Sugar Borders, Ether, Roll, and a few others. The name of the latest book is Sadly, but inasmuch as the title describes the author's cast of mind, it could have been called Patiently, for the Bill Fuller I know is nothing if not patient. In fact, patience may provide more insight into Bill's work than sadness does. Patience is a more common and more subtle feeling than sadness. Patience pays for itself among the nuances of public life, whereas sadness remains indebted to the more conventionally literary fits and starts of private expression. And one of Bill's greatest achievements is a literary voice that articulates feelings which are delicate precisely because they belong to the routines of everyday America. His poetry hums with the daily life of offices, conference rooms, and public parks. This is the world described in these lines from Avoid Activities of the Garden. In the servicing unit, all desks face outward in a circle which has been contrived with no interior. It sits on a kind of pinwheel and spins. Thousands of figures are daily computed to justify it. Assignments are made. People move briskly back and forth, following the rhythms of demand. I think there's a delicacy of perception here that results from Bill's willingness to let the world move quickly through his poetry, which works like a kind of minor sieve, and he patiently allows observations, allusions, resonant words, evocative phrases to accrue until they form a kind of sediment of meaning. Listening to Bill's poetry involves becoming aware of these layers as they slowly build one upon the last, while also enjoying the sort of rush of material that sluices by. Precision is a sublimated form of vagueness, he writes in his latest book. And throughout his work, one hears these alternating modes of perception, one cosmically large, the other mathematically minute, simultaneously expanding and contracting, each redefining the other in terms of lightness and density. And having made a voice that accomplishes this, Bill applies it to far more than offices. In Avoid Activity, Bill, who has worked at the Northern Trust Company here in Chicago for 20 years, explores the languages of finance, but finds in them parallels to the movements of planets and the writings of the 15th century Florentine philosopher Marsilio Ficino, who argued for a kind of Platonic humanism based on contemplation and lyric singing. And sadly, Bill's subjects are equally diverse. They range from the marketplace to Buddhism to the blues. The lyrical and thematic precedents for his meditations on these topics are unsurprisingly various. Yeats can be found here right between Ma Ferguson and Augustine. But as you will hear, Bill's poetry does not meander around these different sources. It flows swiftly and cleanly among them. Following William Carlos Williams, Bill's river of the mind is corrugated and swift. And of all the different writers and singers one hears, and sadly, Williams is perhaps the most present, as these allusions to Patterson's Falls make clear in the poem I Went to the River. Then we heard the sound of the falls, though our view did not advance beyond the previous view, neither was it simply a restatement, it was more low down. These lines offer phrases that may be applied to much of Bill's work. Regardless of subject, this poetry is consistently conscious of the previous view. Bill shifts through earlier texts in order to pluck from them the best of what has come before. Yet this is also a poetry willing to be more low down, a poetry that reproduces the rhythms of demand and refuses to be constrained by the banks of convention as it rushes forward. So please join me in welcoming Bill Fuller.
Geez, I got a lot to live up to. Thank you very much for time, and thanks for having me here. Last time I read here in the local poets extravaganza circus a couple of years ago, I got trapped in Lakeshore Drive and gave a reading which Irick generously described as surly. I'll try to be more patient today. This year of dissembling. William Walwyn, the Leveler, author of numerous political tracts during the 1640s, stands before me explaining that he is William Walwyn the merchant, not William Walwyn the minister. While he is saying this, we both detect a hissing sound as from a steam radiator. The sound rises in volume, eventually drowning him out. Mysteriously, the French doors open, revealing several huge banks of radiators, a gigantic disharmony of hissing, leaping sprays of steamy water, bells sounding, train whistles, the floor rumbling, shaking. Then all is quiet, at rest. Walwyn, who has been talking unheard through the din, is heard again distinctly, gesturing with much animation about the hypocrites whose slanders have tormented him, and who, despite his tempered replies to them in his still, small voice, persist in denouncing him as an atheist. He starts to thunder about the invectives he has been forced to absorb, but it appears he is not used to thundering because there is a certain awkwardness in his delivery and carelessness in his diction. His voice cracks, he motions unsteadily, he begins to stare beyond me through the frosted windows at the snow which is now falling. Suddenly he lunges forward, throwing the windows open to let in the cold wind. Snowflakes sweep by. One can barely hear them speaking or singing in dry voices, drifting voices, dying voices, dead voices, frozen voices, feral voices, bleached voices, tattered voices, gowned voices, learned voices, self-consumed voices, ethereal voices, drunken voices, droning voices, stupid voices, patronizing voices, bleak voices, raving voices, golden voices, holy voices, shouts, stammers, blurred and bloody sounds, which we greet beside the animals kneeling in plaster, translated by electric laws into swollen throats of eyes, imperceptible transfers of attention observed in a zodiac. Screen Memories docket. Let's consider who it was that dreamed it all. Will it actually work? This question has been deferred long enough. The Recalculation Assistance Committee has reviewed and standardized potential responses within a specific range of centralized input and will be offering its executive abstract. In the meantime, staff is asked to recall Section 1.03 of the new mission statement. We intend to work with clients whose values we support. Other business concerned the post request submitted by Lord Herbert of Sherbury, who elegized the death of hands-on training, which, he concluded wistfully, offers access to low-cost techniques for the enhancement of reputations. The committee was impressed. Immediately a vote was taken, phantoms abstaining. It was resolved that all details be transferred directly to the Screen Memories docket for interplay and aporia. Later, trolling off-site, they practiced their auto-sums. The hope for a successful redesign had come down to sublime conceptions versus putting money to work. "It looks like a wall," Lord Herbert said, but the expression in his voice was spurious. Maple. 27 names about to spit. The trouble calls this orthodoxy. If we tend the opposite way, is there not enough room? Do we really have to fight? The sky is serene, round, and brilliant, crossing the main arc to create a plurality inhabited like our own. Deferent, plastered, knotted, nailed, glued, the size of an egg or smaller. Not of the same species, dog-headed men diffused upward in an expanding shell. I could see others in someone else's pain. Did they do that to themselves? Returning to life along the crammed walkway, they begin to talk. I don't reply. It was no dream. My eyes blur shapes, a chunk of asphalt, strings of white lights, a feather bed. Now I know it's a trick. Graveyard trees believe this also. The dawning of an aspect has never learned the epithet sad, jerked from the ground and forced to sit up in the sun's glow. This is the first section of a poem called True Intellectual System. And if you come back tomorrow for the lecture, the Walwyn and True Intellectual System, all these things will start to make sense. But this one section, it alternates in prose, verse, prose, verse. This is the first prose section. In years past, we would spread our accounts in the parking lot, arranging them in terms of large grid. At the northwest corner of the lot, the name of the account was inscribed while working east. Various columns were filled in, detailing the nature of the concern, the steps taken or contemplated to answer the concern, and the subsequent review activity by those deemed to be accountable. After the grid was completely filled, someone would take aerial photographs of it, and prints would be distributed to all affected parties. Eventually, the usefulness of these photographs became subject to difficult, nearly intractable questions regarding the angles the photographer had selected, the allocation of responsibility for the accompanying progress log and record of follow-up, the imprecise indexing of the nature of the concern in the complaint directory, as well as bedeviling inconsistencies in the disclosure and admission of errors. The new procedure surmounts these problems by automating all the relevant factors and presenting them allegorically in the form of tableau. Each individual tableau occurs beneath a general heading such as discretion or performance or virtue. Scenes are acted out to the appropriate audience of managers, at the conclusion of which a placard is displayed detailing the steps to be taken. For instance, in the example I am watching as I write this, the phrase, "Send Sue get well flowers," concludes a dumb show involving a telephone, a bank statement, and a red-faced man named David. I'm going to read 3 poems from a collection published by Bark Press in England called 3 Poems. Dolphin Cartage. Abnormal loan-like surplus, sewn handrail offset due, open mental breath shock, hope corruption call, rebate slightly arched, none freezes, grind them out. The vaguest and most distant eject blue shells as they hover above the old floor, augmenting human material with rags from the 16th century, whose single lamppost contains 2 novae of opposite natures, egg-born, moisture-born. Fallen to their knees, vested or otherwise, each politely expounds the end of all systems in kindness and purity. Back to the street their heads go spinning to relax or bear down, pipes welling with tears. Decayed vegetables contrive non-coming and non-going. Silkworms at their visual peak sweep down dust clouds and dark lanes in a ring of bright gas. 33-fold heaven resolves in 2 scattered heaps. Fragrance of bark uniformly spread atop 1,000-year clusters. Radiant, signless minima tumbling down with fresh knowledge, like great lions roaring or a flower in the sky. Wrapped in auguries, serum calls forth these adjuvant flows, laying sticks over a snake pit, dogmatizing either extreme, the going out, the unshaken, the ambrosial mass of filaments nobody watches. Ring it up using this space. Voted best parking lot for terminal satisfaction. Ease yourselves through the trap door and follow me downstairs. Take up forks and dig with great magical power, revoked by elephants, lovingly interposed, then burnt immediately upon leaving for home. Forget hope, gather not alike, bucket your shares by frozen pond formula. In 6 caves, inscriptions flash, suggesting views once shared to still the mind. Not so easy using that phrase. Not all my choices are in principle what they might be when a blast of sun illuminates them. Profitability death spiral. The woman who pointed out this phrase to me in a meeting at the Northern Trust Company in one of our conference rooms is with us tonight, and I wanted to thank you for the... Occasionally, that's what happens at the bank. Somebody will see something in a memo and want to make sure that I've seen it. If you have enough of these sources, you don't even have to write the poem. Profitability death spiral. So-called self-awareness frees time for clothes. Each year we hear this story, doubtless found troublesome, considered actually to have been uttered by inherent contrast to words of teachers. Piles of dirt inside the ear later found frozen behind the fence. Its symmetry induces amazement, carved capitals in the forebrain resembling 12 chocolate feathers emerging from water. Their concise history shines parallel in a single mental instant beyond the sky, beneath the bed. The dazzling empty heat smaller than a thumb, whose closed lips flash over the rails level and clean. The swans are swimming with replacement parts in each light beam. Innumerable trusted eternal experts sail out to meet us, flat on their backs and adorned with red bows, sawed off in the gloom. Sufficiently calmed, I do hate perfectly all this town, its 8th century debate and defective analysis of burnt perception, blue sparks falling through snow. Pan-fried rust cake vented up shall not provide solace in worshipping postures made for export. 2 trains running parts of code, as I understand this roaring sensate essence slips on the ice of the double star, sunk down in Earth's shadow, the bright brown moon on a field clumped high in the air, unfrozen in mist, always fluid without development. Huge bronze eyes appear on the surface, spun out of weakened breath. Alert all offices to their sinuous motion, wiping their mouths for Sunbonnet Sue with her starched canvas wings lit by a butter lamp as it curves into a glass electric green. Stated carefully, these feelings make events more raw, circulating on hindmost legs, through a total contact system to trace the rigid face of an opponent's view. Its secret and tacit form, with or form without, match strides with the icy light and pale sound of wood chips flicked over the fire, whose dancing spine recalls dependent fantasies, compelled to repeat the fact of conflict, this time lacking authority, animated, exercised, arising, enduring, disintegrating through hooked palms purer than snow, all 12 limbs waving between iron and air, plain eye searching plain flaw drawn upward, muscles inflate during sleep, deaf to nerve by application of dream. A single pore of his skin whitens teeth in the masonry, trailing through weeds, the steps up and the steps down interpenetrate, primevally tranquil, no color, no shape, no place, the calming of all differentiations, insensible, objective, unalloyed. Chicken reel. Mechanical horse adapts its teaching to magic, while its peaceful downward glance fills an imaginary storehouse exactly like space. Nor does an inquirer exist who comprehends it. Bowl weevil of wisdom with sharp sword untainted by miraculous infestation, authentically infused omniscient mind stream, only a little squishy, like petals falling apart. As it combines shouts of cats and squirrels, fastidious of function, these elements will not be absorbed but remain aloof in the composite, brightly colored, with enhanced responsibility when no data arise, suspected of deviation from this year's target and minute discrepancies owed to parallax of executive styles. What are the principles that endure down to the sub-brand, a form of shamanism, free of cessation, free of creation, a flower, privately held above the squall lights. Waves bloom, inwardly spoiled. The concept of vision is unintelligible, except in large format. Smoke trickles out your ear under the concave diaphanous hat, emitting oceans in dry runoff, combustible air in equipoise. It is not so, explains corporate density manual. Many have almost perished from optical defect, for all things arrive as shadows at point of collapse. Red lights passing over the old campground, the holiest in all Tibet, reveal themselves in the depths of the eye, flaring transversely, obliquely, where space is the weight endured. The mill is working, jump up and shout in 100 variable realms, each invaded by duality, quoted at cost, the sky never clear, moon never full, click shut as the eyes fold back in death. The porch light aligned with Saturn, and smoke escapes to memory. I heard the categorical reflection from last year's return filed on palm leaves without anger rise out of the brain, one-pointed, screwed into the heart. I heard fiddle call from the highest plane, immaculate enjoyment inside the shrine room, while enmity's foam then fun, stammering blue-green tide rejects all compromise with what it floods, profound and supportless, bearing it coldly to the pallet on your floor. Across the mountain tops, divining constellations as they bounce in your hand, shades of spectral feeling, 1 degree distant, flattened and rather small, garlands and scents and unguents carrying a blade. The knower does not exist, despite his saffron check stub. Golden flakes of his skin return to star frost, then disappear into earth, swinging from leaf to leaf on airy tips, winding down the slide. How can there be a proposition endowed with darkness in fire? Basic objects leap into the sea, which revives them with doctrine, or a near approximation of an uncorrupted text knocking on my front door. Somebody's had time to burn the dawn cloud, working the slope of available light, no adjustment to expose rods and cones and rocks, included in all things apophatic. No fire where fire is. Affect, isolate, 3, 4, do not make a sound. It seems as if in the sky, sheer unqualified mirrors, partly immersed, are not there, which you are seeing. What is tenable is not attached. You think perhaps you deny it, but the benzene forests in your hair chime chicken wire and smack the gorgeous drone. Fewer words from this point on. The sun is raining. Miles Champion once said that certain things relevant to prediction of behavior warrant discussion without reference to our existing theories. For the assumptions lurking in such theories can render one insensible. Resignation follows from this insight in the form of a bright blue flash emerging from damp twigs. No one wants to capture a physical state that misleads, nor is it appropriate to objectify its absence. Suddenly the seat flips up and I have a sensation of pain. Somewhere out there the truth comes ashore. Roughly, we divide ourselves in two groups, the vicious and the mild. Time distills a single essence from both and walks it up the long staircase to twin rainy skies. The fields. This is good, he yells. I'm waiting for dinner. All night long the stars are chiming. Already the morning sun is here. Materialism was born in India and again in outer space. If we cannot refer to what doesn't exist, then I'll stop talking to you now. The great polar sphere. Speak brightly, lyrically, in the adventure of equivalent cognitive modes. By way of distinguishing these modes, you single out one last condition. But the weather strives to be more exact. The game prematurely ended. The two teams trade insults and quotations from City of God as the train rumbles past, knocking over some cans. A late whistle fades in the autumn sky. Ice forms in my throat, which later I will find technically useful. Snow, 6:36 p.m. Lower utility surface. If you enjoy what happens, then ask to have it happen again, says Ida Red. The appearance of rationality is placed alongside a new perspective, essentially realistic. I know it because I'm locked inside a bird. Precision is a sublimated form of vagueness. There's water in these shoes, your blood or mine. Where the blue line of forest is does not seem logical. Desperate to be encountered elsewhere, with a focus more assured, or inwardly marked by the signs of the major planets, in the dark, chewing an apple. I went to the river. The day was overgrown. The wood was wet and rotten. At the water's edge, geese muscled ducks aside. Then we heard the sound of the falls. Though our view did not advance beyond the previous view, neither was it simply a restatement. It was more low down. The same things kept turning up, leading us back to the start, among disputed groups and types. People would lead forward and drop their trash into the froth. A small bird perched quietly, then flew off. Another small bird chattered at the podium. That was an officers' meeting at the bank. Sadly, a questionable Wright Babinski says hi, hello, despite awful tremors, so do not perseverate in rhymes. My penitential apostrophe rings your burden down without touching the third rail. Kind pity, a new kind of human being awakens to humiliation. It shrinks and turns, bombarded by particles, as your forehead melts into the sea. Facts erupt out of one grand unified sunset, ankle-deep in twittering stunt codes and moral pucker, pernoctating half-off idealist paradox, with tattered pulpy fruit enwombed in waters. You are free to discount all Eleatic motion, cheered to rectify the spaces between worlds. Memphian, state your component adeptus stuck in the driveway. The warmth of the air when she leans forward to suggest the body should be moved non-organically, thus entailing this whole mass of the is, common to those condignly meriting the joys of column 1. Totals that now control pain through aforesaid concentration enlightenment continuum, waving up and down in the hands of a child. Much effort has been spent to perfect their lean, but nobody notices unless it's jammed in your side with final strips of persons and cultures. If we could only stand back as they rather than us, then he's done, no more crying. Pleonastic slugs sprint over the bridge where Freud's heart has opened wide. Comp time boils in blind prehensile imagining, 5 layers down. As Blue Monday aspirates and 11 negative figures are all alike non-blue. Sitting alone on a clear lake, no loss to be feared, yet finely textured, soon we will send the stars to bed. They make an encampment and wait there for morning, repetition, absence, regret. What one pretends not to know, now majestic, with crusts inside the lip, splayed out like tendrils, draping a raw grin that whispers it does know, but won't dissimulate. Stand up now, warders of selfishness, inward and outward. All that get money are compounded of these 3 discrepancies, kinging over the weak. They got speech to eat, who might defy adaptation, or make no use of it, beginning with Bolingo. Savor this practical work and its peaceful liberations. The order of arising is bequeathed the Baroque chateau high on Mount Everest, wrapped in rags of real numbers, dreading credulous raves, Inagon thus dwelt had I been bored once every 100 years, from a single verse, redolent with affliction, and ever more lightly burrowing from within. Now that work is done, celestial societies heave up jewels while headlights scan the dark governing power. It hangs in an old barn, luxuriant baritone and hair-shaped aca bark, root head down with nutriment attached by thick stub heads and thin summer clothes, minus cow's ears, made sharp for writing. Open door, hothead, ass monkey nuptials, let us begin. Is it now established on venerable earth that evolutionary genetics alone might free the egg-born Nagas from your insights and sensibilities? I think so. We formless words steal away with 100 pots of food, although we cannot recall listening to anything discernible. Perversely timed to pay down debt, sees peace to be inflated, and freshly reaving daily nod. Based on a sample of shaken axioms, the rudderless shall rule in the form of a neon cat. When I see this, I saw that only approximately. I knew it made sense. It was truly the same thing I saw before, only deep in shadow. Spreading its own nature without a foundation, lies will maintain it for now, but any future state must kick itself upstairs. Invalid rope reader, in sheer name of auto-routed starch bag, I tell you straight, venom dissolved, securing myself in my father's workshop, the tangible proofs, files, knives, saws, acid sweet appresented squareness, alive in all other facts, a flowing life. Hope cannot help mine estimable death unrattling friend, a pale orange, orange-brown, a tint approaching red. Shut up in coverings is the old man who says, I'm not certain, but I think I understand what goes on anonymously. Mobile steam plant, spare change. If and only if the magic pig were a case of sincerity having been eclipsed by deceit, then feeding it abuses the practice whereby it is eventually dispersed into those for whom no such questions arise. Patient but distracted, joining smokestacks and steeples to points of time distinguished by depth and sunk perpendicular to the landing strip, you direct them in writing to restore the site before the snow returns, electing not to be controversial by consenting to violate abandoned policy. Written in birdseed, your eyes are cold. Improvident lover hastily calls, precious, precious, it was jealousy. But hard hints like yours make a man avoid the earth, I quote. The rest of the stuff I'm going to read here is, I believe, after sadly. So this would be within the last year and a half. Rosa Medra, whom I recently contacted, resigned in 1985. There are other sources frustration hollows out. Experience is a tomb, later abandoned cast iron frame vindicates, but clear light inevitably follows your swan-like shadow. Happy to indulge ignorance, resentment arrives with coiled hands telling this piteous tale prior to interment. It warms the red sun spilling flowers when he was gone, to defy those that deceitfully breathe in triumph over change, nor hear any more what moves them, betrayed into your pocket as I hand you a waterfall. The chapter of the sheep. The application of a particular religious view, together with benefits conferred by Tyrian wisdom, appear to be responsible for the repealing of certain ordinary kinds of human behavior. This unavoidable inconvenience follows. Force, which we call equity, runs back among adjoining shadows to issue a certificate, according to the pattern we observed when ice retires, and the truth is resheathed in a variety of interests. Some prefer that minds and things start over again, abstracted from the need for self-defense, or that sacred and venerable threats maintain no direct connection to the added element simply understood as drinking. Neither can we rest secure after having renounced everything except what intrudes on first principles, reshaping them at the base of the baobab tree. Our constant exposure to sun can hardly be upheld any longer. I know that, Margaret says, thinking of an earlier, less arid time. So a slight doubt is elevated just beyond the desert leaf, as if it were uncaused. No compulsion can be valid against daylight ominously shuffling darkness into acute self-consciousness. Some 40 persons have petitioned so far, and I myself have made my voice heard in ideas close to theirs, uncongealed at the center. Then they took out a cord and tied my hands. Love transfixed by flying generalities, when the lofty and discursive narrow to what is nearby, indigo arachnid howling to crush them into knife points. Red Sea. By means of an exact copy, have faith and understand this negation of prejudice concerning that former time when the field was inconceivable, solitary, sightless, in Egypt or Abyssinia, roaming back and forth, we studied the pain, and her tongue's bleeding was how it looked to us, squinting and pretending not to hear the sandstone gates at daybreak, high, wide, and beautiful, like a sea that sings in the clouds. whose function is to be everywhere dissolving in ripples. Parson Platt, the tormentor of the diggers in the 17th century. Theft, cheat, wrong, or iniquity dance with joy, displacing emphasis viewed fully in these shapes that find their broadest dreams roaming throughout leafy mazes or pressing on from the arbor in spasms toward 3 starved cows. At the beginning it was not so. Handmade goods for all, during times of roasted meats, clustered in the woods like a navel. In trance and out of trance, a former friend of mine was afraid to approach without distinctions imprinted on my face. We sat together, limpid and cool. The same. The people desire their ways be looked into, but won't come up with any names. At the end of the night, they will have assisted one another in the behalf of a vehicle by which they can progress over 400 acres before refusing to recognize the consequences that border on that field, which has been inaccessible to me during the time of great conjunctions in the external forms of the sky. To wash clean this house, I swore I wouldn't act directly on nature. Using double brackets, what kind of experience might we have? Something like the following falls for many hours. How did it used to be said, misery Pharaoh, the covetous horn? Did you learn this as you convalesced? An inward-looking species with limbs of some huge giant and 2 white eyes in rhythmical succession of smoke and fire. As soon as they are stripped of their bark, they travel off to death. But what you declare when left alone seems still to persist, a colorless liquid with a subtle taste. I grow curious at its inclusion. I remember thinking one thing. I received it not from men. I ask who was revealed, since those persons were born too late and naturally of the earth, or elsewhere than in the mind. Homburg. Already confirmed in his preeminence by the public's judgment, which would finally determine who should be modified, he inserted his violins into the head of a seraph, close to the outer edge of M13, where they protruded somewhat, being placed slightly less than upright. Later he wrote a mortgage in deference to the difference, but nothing further forthcoming despite possession of his full vigor, he placed it in default. His mind, being non-created from morning till night, was raked out of water, and his determination to reverie would pass to its final rest in a lustrous varnish of soft twilight. Feeling his great loss, he made no reply, except in the art of label-making, where he excelled all others in convulsions purified with ice. The different. And you who are, when you were going to be, not a line of this work, but a sacrifice, unplanned and without comfort of significance, where all might set forth their views facing the clock, should this come to be concealed. Dog nearby sucked up into the great silence of the ancient decorative order, spun out from moisture and silver white, all agents present, if they exist, various reciters not having mentioned them. Snow and light steam saw someone through firelight, by day seeking out stems, and none to one side spreading tables of earth. In early morning, hills and temples with no original parts. How timid would evening come, and what remains able to talk now swells to the west, windows crowded with special properties and sat together against them, indicating a small space inside, to unshade eyes turned austere, resistant to all luminous varieties. Lie down Article 8th, propagated on regionally distinct materials whose rapid nervous acts do not enter this phase. I'd follow the black and white trees whence they originate deep zoned, pushing lightly into the brain. Padma responds, the mind is open, sprang forth as a flower, and fields of fragrant stars. A little redness along the edge of the path gently animates dried fruit. Long after sunset lingers, a class of tones no longer congenial sheds in a mist, and frozen streams draw nearer the roof of the mouth. Most voices are false, therefore lie still, to look on yonder's wall, discountenancing itself. In ascending orders of darkness, neither arts of prophecy nor smoked fish had asked you, outstretched, one of three things, evasively. From Pope's Letters. One Saturday morning, I was reading through some of Alexander Pope's letters while my son and daughter were building a hospital for a stuffed lion out of blocks. And these two events coalesced. I fell into a trance, and I wrote this poem. From Pope's Letters. My poor father died last night. This morning there's a mist, and someone is racing up the street. The lion in the ambulance, the lion who wrecked the hospital. Esteem I never had for him. I found it not, his broken leg. He stands on his head, and there he rests, resembling a seal or a ghost in a graveyard fed by water and earth. It shines forth substratum, glorious, imaginary perpetuities. Dives and Lazarus, for Bonnie Barber. There are two articles called Article 9th. In them would still be holding in effect of all the provisions not negated by them, and these giving rise to vexations I could not have guessed at. But not even a hint of this falls to earth, deaf as ever. I made my way through the transformation unit past thinning crowds raised in ditches, and I felt his presence carefully cut to fit the frame. And out of this flies a kind of bat on a perfectly level flight path towards all kinds of people apparently silent. What is their common characteristic? With some exceptions, many of them have considerable accumulations or bear witness to mysterious gold in an effort to sustain themselves. In memory / Mousegrove. It seems clear you are still hoping to identify the source of the error, then renounce any claim to it physically. In nature, some hints of this could have been discovered beforehand. Lean over the rail, here's my camera out of range, the haze is green, yellow paint on trees soaking the gravel. Straining to suppress laughter as you approach the sanctuary, all due proportion is engrossed by those stainless blossoming out of their own heads. Eat thereof and drink refreshed. Enter his perforated gates with dignity and excellence of knowledge, and without drowsiness. Manyfold. This dares not money or property be engaged, nor now be propounded, should one make out well, representing the power to you of an automatically acquired carnal imagination. How far are we free, through facilitating expressions, to determine when to be frozen, given an adequate selection of times? Somewhat odd, I makes the opposite mistake, expressed in accordance with what I continue to respect, floating between use and sense. A lot of snails also mention this to me, that she was fired twice in a foreign tongue, whose curious fragments soak up my core, then point out we are actually arguing. Or is it advisable to disturb dead blossoms with nothing I can respond to? For come to that end we shall, considering whether that be meaning to say against, for no memory of need has gone to those that had no right before, but now are come to a permanent fixed interest in something other than themselves. Here secluded, the more you learn, is an absolute natural right which smells of tar. One might be inclined to ask, how is it your legs were bent back? By simplification, one might reply, the formula requires a gesture like this, no exception. Light fog lifts out of darkness, correlated with riches, honors, pleasures, lawyers, armies. It does not extend beyond these, or perhaps it does, having become a spider. The problem of Quint. I've come to the brambles. These are my knees. These are my cottages. I can't read the rest. All is concrete, and that is why I love. These are my trains approaching from the north. These are my cloud banks. I am like a razor used against humility. Northern facts. Neutral cupboard wines my highmost altars saw, whose selfish imaginary power was a little country and some livestock enlarging its scope. Can you not get them at home? Rash days cast them off. These same ideas unwarrantable march past for centuries, caught by roots risen up in their place. Yours till death, 102, absolutely inactive, yet chewing the air. What is this useless 13th sensation? Flames vicious and disquieting, the keen excise clatters like an arrow. For 4 whole days, null, achieve, purge, prepare my mind. A little hectic day at work today. Not quite as organized as I normally am. Well, that's all right. Oh. Never mind. I had it all under control. Riding north. Was it track 12 now swings wide? Our first stop is an apology. Whether to distill that quintessence, indestructible, perfect, complete, somehow pouring from the upper deck. I sleep in the clouds. I sleep in the sea and clouds, capable of only 2 activities, which began at the age of 7. The soul is making a drink from external things, which came to know it, because not akin to it. The silhouette of a bird in flight, or does it permit such speculation? The great sea bear jabs with its tongue, extracting a strange glow based purely on what the document says. Quickly the ship stands against reverence for authority, because not intelligible. A repetition of the forms of doubt, a hunting scene with warplanes on the roof, a man outlined in white lights, walking or dead, who comes in to see these books, then pauses on the grate to inspect his own hand. I feel the back of my neck alive with an entire conjectural system, which explains my lingering here under the blocked beams of the dissipating sun, looking only one way, which is the direction we're taking. Said agues. The rain is everywhere, steadily pressing on luxury portion of lot. Please display remorse for not having gone there, or for not having left from there, glued to the center. The unconditional regularly opposes the conditional. Here they sleep the rights of time. You may turn your face continually. Your eyes may shine in the distance. The sky may reach into a vast interior. I had a mind to a sea voyage, not a transformation. What would the grammar support if I could tame it? I had a mind to cold pie, deeply hung with woods, and arrows eros in this burnished bag with a black-capped chickadee, heading north into tulips. Which way the wind blows, that way we aspirate. Fragrant bursts of orange and red, gently touching oceans of systems. There were pictures of smoke and peaks emerging from what used to be my eyes. Last piece. Called Ode at Work. Head on shoulder, Pamphilus, fascinated by muttering. Why not remove any doubt, however academic, as to the validity of the transfer? If possible, avoid committing funds. The delay between January 31st and February 5th is offered in sympathy to all earthbound travelers to frame them between true and false. how many things we do that are uncertain and how many more to come, puzzling, variable, frail, injudicious, unintelligible, wrong. This is the regression to nightmare. Hotter and hotter the door begins to melt, revealing a small causeway over the investments in continuity and tenure. What will eventually prompt a sale? Kinetic indulgence. Having attended law school, they could not be imposed upon, so we decided to vote their shares. I won't do anything except in the most shameful way. I remember that very well after hours on the phone. Tell me whether seeing consists in opening and turning the eyes. Welcome to town, reviling and provoking words. Your laws shall not reach to oppress us any longer. 1,500,000 reasons to die, beds, leaves, blankets, looking back from afar. Consult my small plastic head. She's about to explode. Pamphilus, you work in this big office? While I pronounced these words, I could detect a faint smile at the window behind me. Then the floor started to shake. I had never called this a memory, but I could talk of nothing else. Now, after 2 years of patient silence, I am still haunted by it. The writer hereof does require that your inferences be removed from his sight. The junkyard and the sun, the milky haze, the standing water, for their work is threefold, and it affects me more than anyone. And I will speak for you without compensation, and together we will pathetically enumerate an homage to the great red dragon, and thanks to our partners in attrition management, and take this bloodstained broadsheet. And do I smell bacon? For the sun makes everything crystal clear, for covetousness is all. Thank you very much.